All right, Julie, we have a really great topic to talk about today. I always love talking with fellow dietitians as well. So, we're going to talk about the food system a little bit and additives and ingredients and kind of what's going on. And we were talking a little bit offline, like we think hopefully we're on the brink of some major changes and a healthier food system and healthier ingredients overall. So, welcome to the podcast. I'd love for you to start out by just telling us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are. We're going to talk about your company and your app and how that can help consumers make more mindful purchases and really see what kind of ingredients are lurking in their foods. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, I'd love to. So thank you so much for having me today. Um, I'm Julie Ruelle. I'm a registered dietitian. I have been a registered dietitian for over 25 years, which sounds crazy to say at this point. I have a pretty varied background. I worked in clinical nutrition for a little bit. I moved more into like a corporate wellness type of role. And then I started working for healthier consumer packaged goods or big food companies, essentially. And I was always seeking out the healthier options. I worked with them to make their food products even healthier, to communicate about the health benefits of the products. And that really gave me a lot of insight into the food industry. And now I'm working for a company called GoCoCo, which has an app that lets you scan any product in the grocery store or in your own pantry to see just how healthy that food is. So it rates the product 0 to 10, 10 being the best. And the scoring is based on the nutrition fact label. So things like added sugar, saturated fats, amount of calories per the type of food it is, but then also how many ultra processed ingredients are in the food item. So I know that's something we're going to talk quite a bit about today. Like, what is an ultra processed food? I can't wait to jump into that, what they mean for you and your health. And our app is not meant to judge anyone or shame anyone. It's really just there to give you information so that you can make the choices that are best for you and for your family. So there's a lot of education component about it that we could talk about today. And I view it as just one tool in your toolbox to help you and your family make healthier food choices.
Sure, that's awesome. And so I am coming up on 25 years as well. I finished my
Oh,
internship in the year 2000. So we're probably the exact same age and graduated at the same time. And yeah, it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been in this field for 25 years.
right.
And a lot has changed. And you and I were both trained in the conventional system, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And we can maybe talk a little bit about that. But yeah, let's start with ultra processed foods because I know like I throw that word around all the time with family and friends. And sometimes people who I think are pretty well educated on nutrition and know a lot about food and labels will message me or call me and be like, what do you actually mean by ultra processed food? Why do you say ultra processed versus whole food? Like, what's the nitty gritty there? Let's start with that and just the basics of how like you are identifying an ultra processed food, because it's very important for when you do go in the app and you're asking like how many ultra processed food ingredients are in here, like what's the definition there?
Yeah, that's a really great question and a great place to start the conversation, I think. It's just learning about what ultra processed foods are. So to your point, processing is different than ultra processing. Some processing is not necessarily a bad thing. It helps us get longer, shelf lives. It means that we don't have to grow everything we eat essentially. So processing is just things like taking milk and making yogurt, taking whole wheat and making whole wheat flour. Those are some basic examples of processing. But what ultra processing is one way I like to think about it is maybe it's things your grandparents wouldn't even recognize as food. Um, are there additives, dyes, preservatives that are added to improve appearance, shelf life, or taste, but they usually don't add any nutritional value. What they're doing is making the food more palatable, so look better, taste better. Maybe it's making it more inexpensive because it's a cheaper ingredient that's added as a filler to make the product you're purchasing more bulky. And sometimes these things they can be addictive. So what we're trying to do is help you identify when those things are added to your foods, how you can avoid them. So way back when you and I both started as dietitians, we didn't have the term ultra processed food. At least it wasn't something that I had ever been made aware of. But it's definitely something that the concept, I was always very aware of it. So something that I've been kind of preaching since the very beginning is if you look at a food label and you read the ingredient list and it takes up the entire side of a box, what are all those things in there? Can you pronounce the ingredients? Are they more than 5 syllables? Do you know what they are? So kind of asking, even way back 20 years ago, I was asking people to look at food labels and say, do you recognize this as food? And sometimes it's vitamins. So, delta tocotrienol, that's a vitamin. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but other things that are added that are additives and dyes and preservatives. So we just kind of developed a way that helps you better track what it is you're eating and see what's in your foods and just become more aware. So like I said, you can make the decisions that are best for you.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I know at least when I started practicing, I was an outpatient dietitian, and I mainly was working in weight loss and heart disease, and which is like, I thought I knew a lot, but here I was like 23 or 24 years old trying to help people with the very layered issue of metabolic health and cardiac disease and weight loss. And I know when I first started, we not only did we not talk about ultra processed foods, but we did not discourage them necessarily. Like, we were just looking at caloric intake and fat,
Mhm.
saturated fat. Like, those were the guidelines I was giving people. And thank goodness things have changed. But I remember, like a couple of other dietitians coming in who were also working in the same weight loss course. We had a big course that we had, and saying, "Oh, did you see the new like light fat-free Cool Whip that's on the market?" And now you can suggest that to our people that we're working with, and just thought nothing of it. We would tell them, go and get some, these frozen healthy foods, or I can't remember the brand, like the healthy, oh gosh, it'll come to me. But it like had a green label, like, get these frozen meals because they're under 500 calories. And it was just,
Healthy choice.
yes, that was it, healthy choice. I'm like, this
Uh-huh.
crazy. So ultra processed foods were not even discouraged, but we didn't have nearly the ingredients 25
Right.
years ago as we
Right.
do now. But I think what's interesting, and you can talk about the GRAS label, the generally recognized as safe for a lot of the ingredients, which is how they get into the food system in the first place. Like, what kind of testing do they need to go through? But I think what's interesting and what people don't always think about is, even if an ingredient is classified as a GRAS ingredient, generally recognized as safe, there are so many ultra processed ingredients stacked together in foods these days that you might have 10, 15, 20 ultra processed ingredients in a food, all acting together. And there can't be studies on these types of things, because we would just, I mean, to try to figure out how all of these chemicals and ingredients are interacting in our body in the first place, and how, and maybe uniquely your genetics play a role, or your lifestyle plays a role. Your tolerance to certain foods is going to be different than the next person. So yeah, I just feel like at this point it's just such a science experiment for the better of our population. But what does that generally recognized as safe kind of labeling, what goes into that, and how are these awful ingredients getting approved? Because we know that a very high percentage of these ingredients that are in our ultra processed foods here in the United States are banned in Europe, and they're banned elsewhere. So how in the world are they still here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So GRAS generally recognized as safe. There's a few different ways that foods can get that, or sorry, ingredients can get that classification. The FDA sometimes does a review and sometimes, not always though, unfortunately, sometimes if an ingredient has been used for long enough, it can be grandfathered in and there has been no
Yeah.
review on it. Um, you know, Expert consensus. Who are those experts? How do we know? who they are and what they're choosing. And, I think a really good example of this is the very recent FDA notification that they're going to ban red dye number 3. That was allowed in our food supply for over 40 years, when over 40 years ago, it was banned in cosmetics because there were links from it in cosmetic products to cancer. So that was still considered to be safe in our food supply for the last 40 years. That to me is just crazy. And at GoCoCo, we have a feature on our website where you can go in and type in any food you're consuming and see if it contains that red dye number 3. There's over 9,000 products in the USDA database that do contain it. But really, that's just the tip of the iceberg. To your point, there's so many other just colorings alone that are already banned in Europe, Canada, other countries. And you also will find out about that if you scan a food with our app. It'll alert you if the dye has been banned in Europe or not. And I think something that's really bothers me about these food dyes is the really heavy concentration of them in products that are marketed towards kids.
Yes.
And something that I applaud California for is they very recently came up with 6 food dyes that their studies have shown linked to behavioral issues in children, and they have banned them from any foods being sold in schools. So I think this is a really great step in the right direction. There's 6 of the synthetic dyes. They've already been banned in Europe for years, and California is sort of the first state to take a step in this right direction. And if you look at those 6 dyes, they're in over 12% of all foods in the USDA database. But like I said, the thing that alarms me more is that they're mostly in foods targeted towards kids. So it's 63% of candy on the US market contains one of those dyes. And then this one, 45% of sports drinks. So parents might be giving kids sports drinks thinking it's a healthier alternative to soda. Sometimes they even are giving them because they think it's a healthier alternative to juice. It might have less sugar than juice does, but 45% contains one of those banned dyes, 31% of sodas, and 24% of just snacks in general. So, it can be really difficult. Parents are thinking they're making good choices for their kids, and these dyes are just in the foods that they're consuming. So it does kind of leave us with a question. You and I were talking about, is this a tipping point? Are we finally making some headway? What will food manufacturers do? Will they have 2 different formulations, things that they sell in California and things that they sell in the rest of the country? Or will they just take it out of all of their foods, which obviously would be the ideal solution? And maybe something that's pointing us in that direction is what the FDA just did, making a nationwide ban. And there are several other states that have similar laws on the books to this California law. So maybe this is finally becoming a tipping point. Maybe this is becoming something that's getting enough media attention. People are saying, why is this in my food? Why does this Advil I'm taking have to be so red? Like it's in the medicine, it's in everything. Just why?
Right. And if the frustrating part is there are 2 versions of so many products. One is made in the United States for the United States people with the synthetic dyes and the crappy ingredients that we still allow. And then there's another version that is made for the European countries that is very scaled down. I'm not saying I would recommend, a lot of these foods anyway, even if they do have the dyes or some of the ingredients taken out, but at least it's less chemicals. So it can be done. And so many food companies have already done it. They're selling one product to the European countries and they're selling one here. And it's just so frustrating because you would think, like you were saying, are there going to be 2 different products, one for California, one for the United States? Like, wise up and do the right thing. But they obviously don't, because they might be saving a little bit of money with using the form that has more chemicals and more food dyes. And I had it's been a couple of years and I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but I had another expert in here, a psychologist who was an expert on food dyes. And she talked about how it affected her son, and he was having suicidal thoughts at like 10 years old. And he was saying how he felt like his brain was on fire because of food dyes. So
Wow.
we know how it can affect kids. It's not in our heads.
Mhm.
It's just crazy that we are, or big food for the most part, not all companies. There are some really great companies, smaller companies, especially,
Mhm.
that have the health in mind, but the big food, I mean, it's just about profit. It's not about people and their health. So,
Yeah.
so when we go to your app, and again,
Mhm.
it's GoCoCo, so
Yep.
GoCoCo. If we put an ingredient in, like you were saying, how sometimes the chemical names of certain things might sound like it's like vitamins and
Mhm.
minerals might sound really bad. So if you were to plug in an ingredient, what is it telling us? Telling us exactly what it is and how it's used, and go into that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything you scan, and we have over 800,000 foods in our database. So anything you scan that has a barcode will pop up a screen with a score 0 through 10. And like I said, that takes into account the nutritional value of it. And it's based on the WHO, or the World Health Organization guidelines. And then also right underneath that, it will tell you if there's any ultra processed markers in there. So then you can click on the ultra processed marker section. It will list each one of the ultra processed markers. Is it a dye? Is it an additive? It'll tell you what it is, what it's used for, and what the potential risks might be. So you
Okay.
really get a lot of information right there from the one scan you do, on any product. And I still think it's interesting. There's still things that I find when I scan foods that I'm like, what is this? There's so many of them that it's hard to know what each and every single one of them is. So I might have a sense that, like, no, that's not something I want in my food. But then I'm also curious, like, well, what is that? Why is that in my food? Like, sometimes it's a texturizer, to make your yogurt have a better texture. It's like yogurt itself has a really good texture. Why do we need that in there?
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of mentioned yogurt earlier, like as something that's processed from milk, and how that's not necessarily a bad thing. But then it's about how many things do we add to that yogurt? Are we adding multiple forms of sugar? Are we adding artificial sweeteners? Are we adding colorings, flavorings? Something you might think of as really healthy, like strawberry yogurt. Check out the ingredients. There might be strawberry flavor in there instead of actual strawberries. There might be those red food dyes in there to make it look more red, more pink. So when you do purchase a more natural product, you might say, this isn't the color that I'm used to, but that's because what we're used to is the chemical dyes that are in our products and things that we don't actually need in there. Like, to your point about them already making these versions in Europe, they still sell Skittles and Fruit Loops and things in Europe. And I'm sure people still buy them, even though they're not so brightly colored as ours are. Also, there's like the coating they put on Skittles to make it super shiny. That is certainly not natural either.
Right.
So there's so many layers of additives and things in the foods that we're consuming as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think you're just eating a pack of Skittles and it's no big deal.
I think you are aware that when you're eating Skittles, there's a lot of sugar in there, and that's kind of a choice maybe you're consciously making. And, while it's not something I recommend you do often, no one food that you eat every once in a great while is going to wreck an entire healthy eating lifestyle. But if we're eating those additives and dyes and colorings and flavorings and stabilizers and texturizers every single day, think about how much of those non-natural substances are building up in our bodies.
Yeah, and that brings up a really good point, and one that I wanted to discuss today, and that's the whole all foods are good in moderation that has really perpetuated a lot of this issue with big food. And big food loves dietitians to spread this message like, oh, that's okay. I can drink Coca-Cola every day because everything's good in moderation. And I know I used to be like, this used to come out of my mouth probably almost every day. And my big hang up with this is like nobody defines moderation. Like,
Mhm.
what is moderation? So I just had a birthday last week, and I had a gluten-free cake from this specialized bake shop here. It's called Happy Bellies, and they make everything gluten-free, and they have grain-free, dairy-free, like all of the big allergens. but by no means was the sugar free. I mean, it had a ton of sugar in it. And so I enjoyed it. There's no food dyes. I do know that. I enjoyed it, but literally, I am being dead honest here. I maybe have some kind of treat like that, like twice a year, like on my birthday, maybe another person's birthday. So in my head, that truly is moderation, and it didn't throw me for a big loop. But other people are like, okay, me eating a piece of cake or, like you said, Skittles, candy, whatever, in moderation, like once a day or twice a day, that's way less than what I was eating 3 or 4 times a day. So I just feel like it's such a problem, and it's such a problem to feed this message into people's head because we have no definition of moderation, and we truly don't know. Everybody's different. Everybody takes in, digests, these chemicals are affecting people in many, many different ways. I know for me, if I eat processed foods, I get very bloated. I mean, and it's not just, I used to think it was just grains and whole grains and those types of packaged things, but now I know, like you were saying, like certain fillers and stabilizers, those will affect me as well. So I think like this has just been perpetuated for so many decades, and people have it in their head like all foods are good in moderation. And I'm like taking a stance. I'm like, we can't just say that broadly, because one, there's no definition for it, and two, we don't know how it's affecting you as a person. So is there anything you want to add to that? And what's kind of your thought process around that message?
First, happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you.
And I love this conversation too. I think it's an important conversation to have because sometimes we're not having that conversation, and I think it is important to have. So usually when I'm working with individuals or I'm creating educational content, whatever I might be working on, I'm encouraging people to decrease. Well, first, let's identify. That's the starting point. Like, let's identify what we're talking about that are things that we should be eating less of. That's a good starting point, because a lot of times when we say everything in moderation, like what do we mean? Which foods should we be eating less of? There's some very obvious ones like soda, candy, anything with added sugar is really something we should be trying to eat less of. So I kind of like to start by helping people identify what they are eating on a regular basis, and then like let's start figuring out where we can decrease some of that. Are you having something sweet every single day after your lunch? What can we substitute that for? Will you be willing to try some dried fruit without added sugar, some fresh fruit? Let's create a new habit there where you're just kind of in the habit of grabbing some M&Ms after lunch. What can we do to make that change? Or is it that you're in the habit of adding coffee mate and sugar to your morning coffee? Let's identify that and let's figure out what we can do to make that healthier. Would you be willing to switch to something without added sugar in it, whether it be a dairy-based milk or a plant-based milk without any added sugar? Sometimes people switch from dairy to a plant-based alternative, but that is loaded with sugar and chemicals. So I encourage people to take a look at the labels and pick one that's only, oats, water, salt, or, walnuts, water, nothing else. So I think there's a lot of ways where we can identify what we're doing and come up with areas that you can improve. And that's actually an interesting topic because we have a new feature at GoCoCo where you can take pictures of what you're eating, and it analyzes what's on your plate and tells you what percentage of it is real food versus processed food, and what percentage of your diet is fruits and vegetables, and then gives you some goals to work towards and gives you sort of a summary of your whole day. That feature is still kind of in beta, but we're testing it, and we've gotten some good feedback on it from people, really helping them to make some changes.
That's cool. Is there protein on there too, or is it just fruits and vegetables?
So it doesn't track your protein, but it might make a comment about your protein. So if it sees you've had bacon, for example, it might say, next time, try to choose a leaner source of protein, like, fish, salmon, plant-based proteins. Kind of gives you some alternative ideas if it sees something like bacon, especially if it sees something like fattier meats consistently. So it will comment on that. It doesn't yet track the percentage of carbs, protein, and fat, but that is something we're discussing internally on if we can do that.
Yeah, what a huge tool that would be. I mean, huge. You can see so many things, like what the ingredients are, what percent. I think it's important to look at the percentage, because I can honestly say, like, the percentage of full foods that I eat is probably 90 to 95%. I do I'm not going to say there's no processed or ultra processed foods in our house. I have 2 teenage boys. I mean, hello, 3 kids. And it's hard to go 100%.
Right,
And I think, there's very few people who are willing to go 100%, but
right.
that's a huge tool. And, like you and I both educate people on metabolic health, and do a lot of work with type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes. And those folks just are not processing carbohydrates well. So to load them up on a carbohydrate, overall diet of 6% carbohydrate doesn't make sense when you are, toxic with sugar.
Yeah.
So that'll be a really great tool. So I'm thinking about, in like, if we're looking at more of or food label, not food labels, but labels for like cosmetics or home type.
Mhm.
Like, I'm thinking of like dishwasher detergent or laundry detergent. And a lot of people know that fragrance, like if you see that ingredient fragrance in there, that is a huge loophole. And there can be tons of chemicals that go into that fragrance. And one thing I always tell my kids, because it's like they just think I'm over the top a lot of times, but you can smell your clothing all day long. Like, that is not normal. Or, like, there's certain kids who come in our
Mhm.
house, our neighbors, like, they come in the house and I immediately know they're there because I can smell their laundry detergent. So I say, like, that's not normal. Like, you shouldn't be able to smell it. That's an artificial fragrance. Is there
Mhm.
anything in foods or food ingredients that we should know about, that kind of like that go under that fragrance umbrella, that there's a loophole somewhere that hardly, anybody really knows about?
I think the very first thing that comes to mind for me is natural flavoring.
Yes, yes. Thank
So
you.
we
I think I have that on my list to add. Yes.
So like we do know we want to get rid of artificial flavoring because that can be tens of thousands of compounds that are being added to food, like volatile compounds being added to food to artificially flavor things. Like I mentioned, artificial flavoring in strawberry yogurt, for example. So a better step would be to eliminate those. And, seemingly the next best step would be natural flavorings and natural colorings. But I feel like that's a big loophole, a big rabbit hole. There's again like tens of thousands of things that qualify as natural flavoring, natural coloring, and maybe it was once natural somewhere at some
Yeah.
point in time, but it's not anymore. When I don't want to pick on any particular sparkling water brands, but they almost all have natural flavorings in them. And to me, like when you describe that laundry detergent, that's what I first think of when I open one of those cans of sparkling water that has natural flavor in it. I can smell that so strongly. And that's not really a real smell of lemon or lime coming out of there. To me, it smells like detergent or something. So I even encourage people to stay away from natural flavorings and additives whenever they can. There are brands of sparkling water that only contain water and a little bit of the fruit that's supposed to be in there and still have less than 5 calories without anything artificial in them. So again, those are the kind of things that I'm recommending. Or get sparkling water and put your own lemon or lime in there.
Sure.
Those are two viable options. So that's kind of where my mind goes, is natural flavorings, artificial flavorings. Neither one is great.
Right. So the natural flavorings, I know I haven't looked into this in a while, but I know you used to have to like contact the company or get in touch with the company and maybe ask, like, what do you actually put into your natural flavor?
Mhm.
A lot of times you get nowhere. Like, they'd be like,
Right?
idea, I don't know what that is. Have we made any headway on that to know?
I mean, not that I'm aware of. I mean, do you remember the scandal some years back about Starbucks for their natural coloring was using like the bodies of beetles or something like that? Like
Oh,
somebody was able to get that answer from the company, and that was what was dyeing things red. That was their natural flavoring.
oh,
So, I
God.
don't think that's just an urban legend. I think that really happened. I haven't independently verified it, but to your point, like you really can't get an answer. I'm sure if I contacted one of those very large sparkling water companies and asked them what they're using for their natural flavorings, they're not going to tell me. It could be made out of fruit or vegetables at some point in time, but they also might distill it, ferment it, heat it, use enzymes. There's something happening to that to become something that can be used in food.
Yeah, and it's
Otherwise, it would just say like strawberry instead
right.
of natural flavor.
Right. And it's just frustrating because you think sparkling water would be very benign. And there's so many products that are like that where you're like, okay, there's only like 4 ingredients on here and it's natural flavoring. Like that I'm good. And it's just so frustrating because people really like, at least the population I work with, like they're really trying, like they really want to be healthy. They're really trying to get ahead. And, like we were saying before, probably if you ingest a little bit of this here and there, it's not going to be a huge deal. But I work with, like, and I'm sure you do too, like really sick people who have layer upon layer upon layer of, different environmental toxins or whatever it is that are coming into play with their healing. And, it's like you think you're doing so well. Like I have my nutrition dialed in. And it seems like unless you're just eating like 1 ingredient foods that are in their entire natural form, which is even tough to do because if you're cooking at home all the time, because again, you think, oh, I'm just using canola oil and like that. Let's talk about seed oils for a little bit.
Yeah.
What's your take on those? And I have seen more and more products going to like avocado oil, like you can get some chips or potato chips, corn chips with avocado oil. But then of course there's the whole, people going in and testing avocado oil and it's using filler oils. It's like, gosh, what are we supposed to do as consumers? It's so frustrating because you want to be healthy, you want to feed your kids healthy food, and then we have all of this crap going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think one issue with seed oils is like the high degree of heat needed to use and the level of, again, processing that's required to get that from its form to what we're actually consuming. So, for the most part, I am recommending that people look for things made out of extra virgin olive oil, like definitely using that at home, using avocado oil. I mean, there are some companies that have more information on their website or on their packaging than others. They like single source is a good one to look for. Like it's telling you like it's coming from one farm in one place. You don't really want to go with a brand that is blending oils from maybe 5 different countries. Like that actually happens with olive oil. It's product of Turkey, Mexico, like 5 countries. So one way I think is because it's hard to tell. I think one thing you can look for, is it a single source? Is it from one farm? Can you trace the origins of it? So that's kind of like one tip that I have to try to find healthier oils. And I just want to go back to a point that you made earlier about both of us working with people with type 2 diabetes and how, most people that we work with diabetes do understand and are working towards decreasing the amount of sugar that they're consuming. And they might feel like that's a lot for me to work on. Like that's enough. It's hard, absolutely. But one thing I want to point out is that ultra processed foods are affecting metabolic health. For every 10% increase in ultra processed food consumption, there's the risk of type 2 diabetes increases by 17%. And that's a study that was done, I believe, 2019. I can provide the link. But there is health risks, metabolic health risks associated with ultra processed foods, as we've pointed out. So there certainly is a benefit to decreasing those foods. And I know it's a lot of work to already be decreasing your sugar and your refined carbohydrates, but when you're reducing those type of things, you're also likely decreasing foods that have ultra processed ingredients. So they do really kind of go hand in hand. So by doing those things together, you're really giving yourself a better chance at metabolic health. And one thing GoCoCo recently launched is a diabetes alert feature in the app. So while you're doing the onboarding, which is really quick, you say if that's a concern of yours, like, do you have prediabetes? Are you at risk for diabetes? Do you have diabetes? Are you living with diabetes? If you say yes and you want to opt into the alert, that's one extra feature in the app. So in addition to the health score and the ultra processed food ingredients, you'll also get alerts to foods that are not ideal for people living with diabetes. And they were created by registered dietitians and certified diabetes educators. The algorithm was created by them. And it includes foods that are high in added sugar, have a lot of refined carbohydrates, don't have a lot of fiber, have a lot of saturated fat. And it tells you in the alert, like, why is this food getting an alert? And I think one of the best features about the app is the education component. So if you are getting a really low score on a food, if you're getting a score that ranks below a 5, there's a section on the app that says alternatives. So right within the same category, let's say you pick up a popcorn, and let's say it has added sugar, because some of them do. It'll give you some suggestions for, maybe popcorn where the ingredients are nothing but popcorn and coconut oil, and maybe salts too. But so there's definitely the alternatives and suggestions feature, and there's also recipes. So let's say you scan a oat bar and there's no healthier oat bar alternative idea, I can give you a recipe to make an oat bar.
Amazing. I'm loving this app more and more as we talk here. But yeah, and I wanted to ask you about the diabetes alerts. That was on my list too. So I'm glad that you brought that up. But yeah, this can just be a huge resource for everybody. I mean, even me, like
Yeah.
scanning a food and really looking at what's in it. And I mean, there's certain ingredients, like you said, there's so many ingredients, thousands of them, that sometimes I read a product, I'm like, I have no idea I have no idea what that is. I probably shouldn't be ingesting it, but I really have no idea. And I know one of the things that I get a little kickback with working with my patient population is that, it's so expensive it's expensive no matter what you eat. I mean, I go to Costco and I'm like, I just went there with my son who was going back to college the other day, and he's like, what do you think this is? And I'm like, oh, 400 at, easy. And it's just, you look in there and I'm like, it's so expensive to eat. So hopefully we'll see some food costs going down, but that's always a big thing that people give me kickback. Oh, it's expensive to eat healthy. And I'm like, yeah, like you are going to probably pay more, but when you take ultra processed foods out, like those are not cheap either.
Right.
Take those out, eat at home more often. Plan your meals ahead of time. Try to plan them around, like if you have, circulars that you're trying to plan around, make things in bulk when there are good prices on things, eat in season. There are ways to keep the cost down. And I know that it seems like, and I just an example, like we don't have a whole lot of chips here, but it's like, if I'm looking at the avocado brand, potato, with just 3 ingredients, potatoes, avocado oil, and salt, they are probably twice as expensive as a lot of the alternatives. But then you think to yourself, well, do I need these at all? Can I just leave them out, or can I like slice my own potatoes at home? And I know it's a little bit more effort, a little bit more time, but I just think to myself, like, this is an investment in my health. Like I just turned 49 and I have no medications. I have no health issues. I feel good. I sleep well. Like, and there's so many people my age who are spending so much money on supplements and medications and doctor visits and testing. And so when you look at it as more of a health investment, it's a little bit easier to buy into.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
As ultra processed foods, like they're subsidized, the ingredients are
Yeah.
cheap, and it to get around that sometime.
It is. And, like something like the avocado chips, oil chips that you mentioned, they do go on sale. So, if you really want those for your household, for kids' lunches, whatever you're doing with them, purchase them when they're on sale. Look for those, like you said, planning meals around circulars. Like that's certainly one thing you can do. Like, and when they're not on sale, maybe you make them yourself, like you said. So when they are on sale, you get a break from making them. And maybe you end up liking the ones you make even better. Like maybe you make carrot chips in the air fryer and they're delicious, and that becomes something new that you can work into your routine. There's other things that, you don't always have to purchase fresh vegetables if they're out of season and they're expensive. Frozen vegetables can be a great substitution. Just again, look at the ingredients and make sure the only thing in that bag is green beans, that there's not anything added to it, that there's no weird sauces or anything. Like make the sauce at home yourself. a bag of frozen green beans is much less expensive than a bag of frozen green beans that contains some highly processed sauce. So if you make the sauce at home from simple ingredients, it's going to be less expensive and much healthier than the commercially made kind. Store brands can be a good way to save some money. And oftentimes the store brands are made by the big food manufacturers. They're just private labeled and they're the exact same ingredients. So when you're purchasing the store brand, definitely check the ingredients, use the GoCoCo app, scan them. But a lot of times they're the same. So that's a way that you can save some money. Because I completely agree, food costs have gone up tremendously. Like I feel it when I go to the supermarket as well. And I really try to purchase things that are on sale. Like yesterday, I was at the grocery store and one certain type of apple was on sale. And, I bought that kind of apple because it was $1 less than the other type of apple. So a little bit of planning ahead, or even just when you're at the store looking for, you give yourself a goal. I want to buy 3 types of fruit today. Look at what fruit is on sale and what's in season and what looks best instead of saying like, today I have to buy these 3 fruits. So for example, yesterday I was going to buy blueberries, but raspberries were on sale. So I bought raspberries. There's definitely a lot of ways that we can save some money while still making healthy food choices.
Yeah, and I do a lot of online shopping because then I'm not tempted by things that I wouldn't buy if I weren't in the store. So that I think saves me some money too. But as we close out here, so a lot of ingredients can negatively affect our bodies and give us issues, but are there like 2 and 3 ingredients in your head where you're like, okay, you pick up a food and it's got this in the ingredient list, you just put it back, like you are not going to go there? Are there any ingredients you can think of where you're like, nope, that's just a deal breaker for me?
I mean, for me, it's more about the quantity of something that's in there, like the amount of added sugar types that are in things that we even think are healthy, like nutrition bars, for example, like a protein bar. You look at the ingredient list and there's 4 different types of added sugar in there. And, you and I both know that the ingredients are listed by order of weight. So whatever the thing that there's the most of in that food product will be listed first. And that's one way that food companies get around having to list added sugar first, as they put 4 different kinds in there. So they might use brown rice syrup, they might use honey, they might use, just straight sugar, and they split it up to 3, 4 different kinds so that it doesn't have to be listed first on there. And I just find that to be, so deceptive and trying to, honey might have some health benefits on its own, but whatever kind of processed form is being added to that nutrition bar is not the same. So people might see, oh, made with honey, this is a good choice for me. So I think for me, more than a specific ingredient, it's things that are marketed as healthy that really aren't healthy that bother me the most. So seeing like, maybe diet versions of something that they take out the fat, but they add in added sugar or artificial sugars or all of those artificial ingredients to still try to make it have the same mouthfeel and texture. And when you eat it, you're not going to be satisfied because your body knows that you're supposed to be giving it whole nutrients that have been taken out and replaced with things that are artificial. So for me, that's what gives me the biggest pause. And the thing that I'm always kind of rallying against is things that are supposedly healthy that are just filled with added sugars, artificial sweeteners, chemicals, additives. That's my biggest pet peeve.
Yeah, and in my courses, I always teach my students, like, go to the ingredient list, like, don't look at all of the pretty colors and all of the wording, like, even if it's organic and and like you said, it's got 5 types of organic sugar in it, that's not a good choice for most people.
Right.
And you're just going to be tempted by it and pay a lot of money for something that is not going to probably be helpful to put into your body. Those are all really great. And it's like, if we could just like put everything in a black and white bag and list the ingredients, it'd be easier
That'd be amazing.
know what you're eating. But I think it would just take all of that deceptive wording away. And it would make things a lot easier. All right, so let's talk about the app a little bit. Does it work for restaurant foods at all, or fast food, or is it just like things?
So not yet, but that's something that we're working on. Like if you were going to go to a fast food or a fast casual restaurant, and you could type in the foods that you want to eat. That's something we're working on. So we don't have it yet. So right now it's anything with a barcode. But like I said, there's over 800,000 items. So anything with a barcode you can scan.
That's awesome. Okay, so the app, is it free versus paid versions, and what's involved with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have a free version of the app, and because our whole goal is to help more people make better choices, most of the main features that I was talking about today, like the diabetes alert, the food scanner, the alternative food ideas, those are all free. So that's all in the free version. There is a premium version of the app, and that costs around $50 a year, I believe. So that includes everything we just mentioned, plus a more sort of tailored experience. So you do a little bit more onboarding, and it sends lessons and personalized advice to you. And we are offering any of your users a year free of the premium version of the app. So we'll provide a code in the show notes for that.
Yes, I'm really excited about that. So, but the free version, my gosh, that's a lot of resources and information available there. But yes, we'll put the code for the free year, paid, or the premium version in the so it's GoCoCo for GoCoCo for the app. And
Yes.
very excited that I was introduced to that. Anything else that we didn't talk about that you really want the listeners to know about? Or anywhere else that they can follow more about?
I think that we did a great job covering all the topics. Our website is GoCoCo.app. And you can go on there, and like I said, there's a database where you can type in any food and you can see if it has that dye that was just banned by the FDA. There's a lot of resources and information on our website, so you can go take a look at a lot of free lessons and things that are on there that were created by registered dietitians. And I think otherwise we really covered sort of all the topics I wanted to talk about, the things that were on my mind, all these food dyes and additives and added sugar and things. So I really thank you for the opportunity to come on and have this discussion with you.
Yes, absolutely. And I thank you for all the work that you've done. And I really think we're heading in the right direction. And if we can get people educated and consumers educated, consumers what drives the whole food system. So
absolutely.
Go get the app and use that, and a very valuable resource. And this is such a huge, important topic, especially as we look at the next generation and how unhealthy they are becoming because of food systems. So this is helpful. And I think kids would love this and be able to get a lot of education from this as well. So thanks for coming on and sharing all your knowledge with us.
Thank you.